Just to get started, Joe, if we could start with you. I know everyone here would kind of like to hear your kind of path to where you got. I know that you went to Northwestern, you worked in advertising, directed features, and now obviously a lot of pretty tremendous television. So could you tell us kind of how you jumped from advertising over into the entertainment side?
My first job out of school was I was the AV coordinator at an ad agency downtown, BBDO Chicago. My wife started off in advertising. She's a former Northwestern grad too. And our dream had always been to make a movie, and an independent movie. And this is back now, we're going back a long time, the early 1990s. And in 1993 or 4 or so, we basically credit carded a movie called Thieves Quartet. It was like a crime drama. One of our actors is actually here tonight, Richard Hensel. Richard. And it basically got it was back in those days. Actually, you can still do it now, I guess. I'm seeing more and more of it in the New York Times, but you could make a movie. We found a very small distributor who opened the movie in New York. It got reviewed. Even though the movie didn't make any money, off the reviews, I got work, and that got me started in the business, really, out of advertising and into films. And my first, right after that, I had a deal with Dimension Films, which was the Miramax genre vision at the time, and did a lot of kind of very low-budget horror movies. And then at this time, then I found myself that's all I was being offered, and that's all I was doing. And then in around 2000 or so, I changed my agent, who was involved in television. And at the time, television didn't have the cachet it has now, but I just wanted to do something different other than the horror movies. Anyway, and at that time, television was more wide open than it is today in terms of opportunity for directors. And I just started directing television, and I got a big break early on when I got to do an HBO show, The Wire, as a director. And then things opened up for me there. But anyway, so I came from advertising to like the indie film to low-budget horror and into television about 17 years ago.
Excellent. Impressive evolution. Carla, can you kind of give us your path to where you've arrived today?
Sure. I was a PA in New York City for many, many years. I think I had 700 days before I joined the Directors Guild, just, on the streets. And in those days, it sounds weird, but we were just a bunch of ADs, PAs, and we went from one film to another. And we just worked and worked and worked and worked. And then eventually I just joined the Directors Guild because I had enough days, and I thought, why not? And then it was big. Then I thought, well, I'm working in New York as an AD on big films. Why don't I try to go to California? So I put out the word, and I got a call for this from ADs that said, we're doing this show Back to the Future 2, which turned out to be Back to the Future 2 and 3 because it was too big of a script. And I went to California, just went out there, met them, and just bought a car literally in a day. And just, here I am, and I worked on that show for 13 months straight. And it was a great experience. Hard, 6 days a week. And then I just started getting work as a second AD. And I think I did Fisher King after that, and Dying Young, and just kept going. And then I decided to be a UPM, and that took some time. That was not a direct, I was a UPM AD on second units for a while. I did Polly a Parrot's Tale, and Almost Famous. That was a really fun one with Cameron Crowe. And then finally, I started getting to television. And my first thing was I got hired on Grey's Anatomy, which hadn't aired yet. So we did like 12 episodes. We had no idea what whether it was good or bad. The show ended, and then I got a call, well, it's airing, and it's doing pretty well. And so I went back to that for a second season, and then I left that show and went on to different shows. And then, feature films, it used to be there were a lot, and now it's like either the huge films, or the very, very small ones. The middle films don't really exist anymore. They're very far and few between. So a lot of us got out of the feature film business and went into TV. And as Joe says, TV has a much more, it used to be like you're a feature person, you wouldn't do TV. Now that doesn't exist anymore. So, and I went into TV, and Bob's your uncle, so.
Excellent, excellent. And Jim, if you could tell us a little bit about your path. to
Same
start off.
same as Carla's. Back to the Future 2 and 3. No, I bought a camera. I'm an actor and writer, I think, first to me. So I studied acting in college, and it is no secret that if you are not, or the fastest way to get work is to make work. So started learning how a Mac works and learning how a video camera works, and started making shorts that were not great, but then you learned and kept going and kept going. And so 4 or 5 years ago, we shot this web series, which is the Jamz. My friend Chris works at a radio station, so it's just 2 guys who are working the overnight shift at a radio station, trying to be heard, and they have an audience of 9, and they're all weird people that would be listening at 2 in the morning. So we shot 20 episodes of those in a radio booth, which has the benefit of being a soundproof room with professional grade microphones that are just there. So I think for that we accidentally got a really good production value out of it, submitted it to the festival, pitched with directors and networks at the festival. We're lucky enough to win the Orchard Go project, which is a straight-to-series 6-episode pilot deal. So the idea being that instead of making 1 pilot, they wanted to do this experiment where we're going to film, it ended up being 4 episodes, and then try and shop the series around that way. So 4 years later, with a lot of question mark downtime in between, last week we are distributed on Netflix. So now I'm here.
Congrats. That's great. Joe, could you share kind of what the nuts and bolts of maybe this last season looked like for you in terms of what the rotation was for directors, how many episodes you did, and then how long you'd spend on each episode?
On season 4 of Chicago Fire, I personally directed 6. And we have a roster, I'd say, of, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, between 7 and 10 directors who kind of we've used over the years, have come back and proven themselves, that we're comfortable with, who like us. And what was the rest of the question?
How long per episode then?
Oh,
do you have to prep it and shoot?
Television. I mean, our show is, and this is right, pretty much all network shows, is you have 7 to 8 days to prep it as a director. Hopefully on day 1 of prep you have a script, but that is not always the case. And then you have 8 days or 9 days. Like us, we're technically an 8-day shooting schedule, but we have usually a 9th, what we call a double up day, and usually that's when we'll do. Our show is Chicago Fire, so we do a lot of fires and stunts and effects. So the 9th day in any given episode is it's more than a second unit, but it's dedicated to usually something along those lines in terms of, so because day 9 of the episode that's finishing is usually day 1 of the next episode, and so that episode usually is on stage shooting. So we're trying, it's a scheduling nightmare because you have to jump cast around and make sure they're available for, if necessary, for both units. So, but to answer your question, the short, it's like a 15-day turnaround in terms of prep and shooting, and then per the DGA, a director usually should have 4 days to do their director's cut. Again, if there's an air date coming up, the director might not get that. But that's the way it works. And so after those 19 days, the director moves on to usually another show or whatever else is on his or her schedule.
And then for you, your schedule is obviously much different from Joe's because you're across all the episodes, correct?
Yeah, but no, Joe, when he's not directing, he's producing with us.
Sure.
So we miss him when he's gone because we don't have his influence, and his input. But it's the same. It's basically 7 or 8 days of prepping and then 9 days of shooting. And other shows are like Chicago PD and Chicago Med really can do it in 8 days, which is better, is easier on some level. I wanted to make a comment, I grew, and when I came in the business, I was on the streets of New York and PA, like in the big shows, and then you on created your own way. I just think it's interesting that people come at it in very different ways. Yeah, and it's interesting to me. Yeah.
The credit carding a movie sounds horrible. I mean, no, and I've read a lot of books, and I've read a lot of, the stories from the pre-digital, pre-spoiled brat millennial age, where it's like you had to shoot on film and have a person cut that film in a room, and that costs $70,000, and you need to figure out how to do that.
It's a big leap of faith, as in any creative endeavor. And I mean, we were lucky, or not lucky, I shouldn't say that, but we were fortunate in the sense that once we started having dailies come in, we could show people we just weren't Joe and Colleen making a movie. We were for real. We had, it looked like a movie. I mean, a low budget movie, but it looked like a movie. So once we had some, in a weird way, I know there's that term now, proof of concept, when you shoot a project, our dailies were our proof of concept. So we could show people look, this is what this is what we've been able to do for a very little amount of money. And people would say, yeah, I can see that. And then we'd have investors, of course you start off with family and friends, but then we actually had third-party investors who didn't know us from Adam investing in the movie. So that's how that worked.
Which you couldn't do 20 years ago, right? I mean, that was very hard. I mean, you'd have to do it in film, and you'd have to get someone to cut it. And
well, no, that's right. We had to, there was like the credit card, basically it was we floated the loan, basically. I mean, we had one big break that convinced Colleen and I to go ahead and make the movie is, at the time, and Panavision had a new filmmaker program. So you could apply to it, and basically you would, send your resume and send the script. And if they okayed it, they would basically comp you a camera and lenses for a month. So and we applied for that early on in the process, and we were trying to raise money, and we couldn't have it. But then when Panavision, we got the letter from Panavision saying you've qualified for our, the new filmmaker program. It was like, well, let's just go ahead and let's go ahead. This is a sign. You're always looking for signs when, are we doing the right thing? Because at the time we did this, I basically left my job at the ad agency. We had a 3-year-old son, and I was in my early 30s. We were renting, and it was the whole, the kind of possibly a worst case scenario if you roll the dice and it doesn't work out. So we said, but this is a sign. You're always looking for those signs. Let's just do it. Let's go ahead and because what we paid for first was the film stock, as you said, because and back then it was $1 a foot in terms of processing and shooting and the stock itself and the processing. So it was but we took the leap, and I'm here sitting on this panel today. I guess it worked out, but you just never know, But it was we just had to go for it, because if we didn't do it then, we weren't going to do it.
Did you stay here? Have you lived in Chicago the whole time?
Yeah, we lived in Chicago. We shot that movie itself was shot in Chicago and actually parts of northern Michigan. But it was all local crew, local cast. We had no names. We didn't know better back then, so we just made the movie. But it was all local.
Good. What is a piece of work that came your way that you passed on that you wish you would have taken?
Back to the Future 1.
Yeah.
Not that old. Drastic Park.
Oh, really? Nice. What about something that came your way that you passed on that you were glad you passed on?
Kindergarten Cop.
Very nice. Joe, what about you? Something that you passed on you wish you wouldn't have, and something you're glad you did?
I can't say I've passed on anything that I feel regret. That I wish I had taken. There's nothing that I said, I wish I had done that. But in terms of the opposite side of that coin is when, I think I mentioned earlier, when I was with Dimension and I was just getting tired of, I could see myself being segregated to this kind of filmmaking, and I think they offered Highlander 7 or something, and I was like, I think I'm done. I got to move on somehow or another. I got to get, I have to go on to the next thing.
Nice. Jim, what about you? Is there anything that you've, or something you wanted to have?
Sure, yeah. I was going to say, I don't pass on it yet. I would like to pass on things. I did do an episode of Chicago PD, so that was huge. Legit huge, because I was on the murder board, which is what my sister-in-law called it. She's like, you were one of the murderers. You were on the board. like even when you weren't in the scene, like you were in the scene. So that was a private goal or personal goal. Yeah, no, I mean it's hard because when you're scrapping what you can together, you can't say no. And even now, you know, things that look goofy or things that seem silly or things that are gonna go up on the internet, you know, you don't know what the next thing is. And I've, you know, some of my good friends are the Katydids who have the show Teachers that was a web series that got turned into a TV Land series that just got picked up for 20 more episodes, and it's like that was a weekend that started as a weekend. So you never know if your friends say, "Hey, do you want to do this thing?" It's like, yes, just in case.
The timing seems good to bring up. Joe has done a web series with his wife called Boy Band, and you've done 2 seasons of it now, Joe.
Yes, they shot 2 seasons. It started off as a short, which basically became season 1, and then last summer they shot season 2, 20 some odd episodes.
And could you tell? Actually, do you want to look at it a little bit, and then we'll talk about it?
Sure.
We've got a clip of it, so why don't we go ahead and roll that now? Obviously, a lot of recognizable faces up there to most of us here in this room. And I know in addition to your wife, you also have your son and daughter were both involved as well. So this seems like a pretty personal project for you. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea? You did 1 season, and then kind of what has happened after season 2?
Well, first of all, I have to say it wasn't my idea. It was Colleen's idea and her brainchild. And she put it all together. I mean... And like I said, the short was done 2 years ago. The season 2 was done last year. She's been working on it. As Jim knows, and when you're doing, you know, it's a one-man band kind of thing in terms of she's responsible for putting it all together. She's been working around the clock, literally at times, but it's paying off. One of the reasons she's so busy right now is. They're delivering. There's a new kind of it's a Netflix type distribution mechanism called Full Screen, which is part of Peter Chernon's some brainchild he has going, and Full Screen itself just began this past week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, and Boy Band's scheduled to make its debut, I think, sometime in June. So it's very exciting. I mean, you know, it's new frontier. We don't know where it's going to lead to. But hopefully you'll find an audience and get out there. And I'm very proud of Colleen. They did a great job. And it's a real family. Our daughter Maura is in it, and she wrote some of the music. And our youngest son Matt's in it. And it's a lot of our friends, kids, people we know in Evanston, where we live. And it was a real family and friends kind of project.
That's great. I mean, I think for a lot of people here, both of these web projects are seeing individuals, you know, start from scratch with one idea and take it to life like that. I mean, obviously, production quality was tremendous on that show. Can you tell us like what you shot on, those kind of things? How big of a crew you worked with? I mean, I know you obviously kept it small, but I watched 3 episodes and production quality's there.
I mean, it's a very small crew, but a lot of it's because of our production contacts in the city. We were able to get people who they might be like a grip on somewhere in town in Union, but we gave them the opportunity to be the key grip. And the DP would be like a camera PA, or an operator on a show. But this was the opportunity where Colleen would hire them to be the DP. So everyone, it was, and a lot of these, a lot of the crew people are all from DePaul, Loyola, Columbia, and some Northwestern kids. I think were part of the team too. So we really drew from the infrastructure here in town, the growing infrastructure here in town. But it was all, like I said, Colleen handpicked her crew and her cast.
You mentioned a lot of people from here in town. I think that's a great segue. If we could ask you, in terms of talent here in the city, a lot of people wonder, do I have to leave? Do I have to go to LA? Do I have to go to New York? Do I have to go to Atlanta in order to move up the food chain here in the city? And I guess how would you respond to that, or what advice would you give to folks here?
I don't think you have to leave. As the film business, it seems to me, is getting busier and busier here. I mean, especially with our shows now, probably we're getting a 4th show, Chicago Justice. The only thing I would caution is you need to learn from people who have been doing it for a while. the problem, I don't want to say, the challenge with people in a small town in Chicago, and the film business is a small town like Boston or New York, not New York, but New Mexico, is that there's only a limited crew base, and a lot of people move up very, very quickly that you wouldn't move up that way in New York or LA. It would take you much longer. And in some ways that's good, but then you don't have the proper training. So you need to find people who really, who've been trained properly. We see that a lot. You're become a prop master before you really should be a prop master. And so perhaps you're not as good as you could be because you haven't had the time to really understand everything it takes to be a really good prop master or key grip or AD or whatever it is. So that's the only thing. There's a lot of people here now. Just, pay attention and see where, how long. They're like our gaffer and our key grip were both worked all over the United States, and they're really, really good. Those are the people you want to learn from. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
Absolutely. But I would say, if you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, I would say, I would leave town. I'd go to New York or LA or whatever the boom, New Orleans, whatever that was back then. But now, at this current point in time, I'd say stay here and you can. I mean, there's the flip side of what Carla was saying, and she's absolutely right about people should know their craft as they work their way up. But there's a lot more opportunity now than there was 5 years ago, and then I think there's a lot more opportunity here than there is in most American cities right now.
And it's the Chicago shows like Fire, Justice, Med, PD. To be honest, like the thing that's building the infrastructure and is giving a lot of confidence is that there are 4 network dramas in this city. I mean, our crew for what is now the full-length version, it is kind of what you were saying about boy band. It's people who work in the city, who work on these shows, but we're able to graduate up a level, and it's like that infrastructure would not be there, and the idea of producing an independent show in Chicago would be 10 times harder if it weren't for, the Dick Wolf multiverse, which we are joining, by the way.
What was your path to market for your show, Jim? Can you tell us?
Yeah, no, it was, so the Orchard and the NYTVF were the 2 production companies who took it out. They have their contacts and brought it out, but the path was unique and interesting. I mean, iTunes offered a 3-week exclusive window where it was only available on iTunes, and in exchange it was on the homepage of the iTunes. They pushed it really hard, and to my knowledge, that's something they don't frequently do as far as creative or original content. The Netflix distribution, which is also Netflix and Xbox and Fandango. There's 5 or 6 digital platforms that are carrying it. It really kind of is. It's just a format to get it seen. I mean, we are excited that it is available to be watched. So the path was not as linear, I think, as most. It wasn't like a network saw it, loved it, bought it, and went with it. It was very much again the digital space is kind of like the Wild West. I mean, so things are getting done in ways that have never gotten done before, and I think for people like me, who's very early on, it's like, okay, that sounds right. And I think for people who've been, in the industry, including the people who we work with at the festival, they're kind of like, this is weird, this is new, this is experimental, and it's like, if you say so. I mean, cool.
Joe, let me ask you, because you've been doing this for a while, do you think with all of the outlets that we have now, is it harder to put something through? Is it harder to break through and get eyeballs because the competition, there's just so much. I mean, there's Netflix, Hulu, anything on demand via your Comcast, or the choices are massive.
I mean, I agree. I think the choices are massive. I think what the difference is from, say, when I started back, a long time ago, is you can make the project, whatever your project is, you can make it for a lot less money than back when I started off, because as you mentioned, it was like you don't have to pay for film stock anymore. You can literally do it off your phone now. Hopefully, the idea is there, but it's I mean, it's a trade-off. There is more competition in the marketplace, but yet you can get your product out. You can make a product lot simpler and a lot easier than. So I think it's a double-edged sword, and I would say I would err on the side of being able to make it, and then just having faith in it, and they'll get out there and people will find it. I mean, I have no, that's totally anecdotal type evidence, but that's the way I would approach it.
There's also more marketplace too,
Yes.
which is a huge thing that you can make a show that would not be a network show because an audience will find you if you are on a streaming service or if you are on demand or if because there's so much more content, there's also so many more outlets for content, or vice versa.
And Carla, let me ask you. I mean, you've worked on Weeds, which was a hugely acclaimed, cable show. Likewise, the Chicago shows are all very well acclaimed as well. At a point where, in some degree, I think people thought scripted broadcast, meaning the big networks, were kind of dead. Like the good stuff was all on cable. But it feels to me anyway. I don't know. You could speak to it better. Does it feel like it's swung back and the networks are competing just as much with cable? Or is that a loaded question?
No, the networks are doing great, but a lot of people, and I'm not really an expert at all, but that the network is sort of an outdated model, and it's cable and computers, and I'm not the best person to talk about that. But I think we're doing really well. I'm sure Dick Wolf and his shows are going to stay on the air for a long time, but clearly cable is the future.
Joe, do you have?
The only thing I would add to that is what's the beauty of what Jim's done and projects like that is he would have complete creative control. I'm assuming you have complete creative control. What Carl and I are doing now is there is an entity that we answer to, a corporate entity, and for better or for worse, and I think that goes across the cable companies now and. For however independent they are, there's their business model. There's a brand that they're perpetuating. The beauty of these kind of projects is, in boy band too, is that it's the I'll say filmmaker, but it's the creator or the creators. Usually, it's a collaboration of some sort. It's whatever they want. It's they have complete creative control, which you really don't have when you start going up the food chain. When there's other more cooks in the kitchen, and there's a lot more. You have to answer to a bottom line. Where at this level, it's like the bottom line is whatever your imagination is, which is having watched Colleen do her thing. It's like I can see that's very appealing.
What's next step for the Jamz in terms of? Do you know if there's going to be another season?
We don't. So everybody put it on your Netflix queue. You don't have to watch it. You just have to put it on and then go get a haircut and just let it autoplay. No. Right now, we are just pushing the rollout. It's Sunday, it launched, and so we don't know. There's no clear path forward, but there hasn't been a clear path to this point. So we're kind of optimistic and letting it play out.
Great. Mike? Do we have a clip to show? Is that what you're saying?
I was saying let's do it like that. Are you already asking these guys for questions?
No, not yet, but I was getting ready to.
That's what I was
Perfect.
I was giving.
Excellent.
I was trying to come up with the universal thing for the audience for questions, but I couldn't come up with it.
No worries.
I just
Thanks.
kept going like this.
Do you guys have some questions for these folks? Yep, right up there, young. Now for the legislative portion of our program.
I have to hang around for this one.
Yes. If the tax incentive goes away, a lot of shows will leave. I think that Chicago will have enough of a base that they'll continue to come here, just like New Mexico. The tax rebate went away in New Mexico. A lot of jobs left, but some jobs stayed because if you needed to do like a cowboy movie or a Western or something, it would certainly impact Chicago. I don't think that New York and LA are going to be the only places ever again. That's what I think. But it will impact it, certainly.
Yeah, I think it's who's offering the best tax incentive at any given moment. My understanding is we've extended ours into at least to 2020s, which is good.
That's true. That's confirmed. So there's no date where the Illinois tax incentive goes away. So
unpack.
We can do make believe, but
Any more
that's a
questions?
make-believe question.
Right over there. Yep.
Repeat that question.
She asked if mid-sized movies had a chance of coming back. In your opinion?
I would hope so. I have no idea. You know, that's a Hollywood thing. That's it's the big blockbusters and the teeny little movies.
Yeah, but the days of the $20 to $30 million, if that's medium sized, those are few and far between. I mean, this is just people that I know who are making independent movies. Like if you can make it for under $4 million and there is a quote name attached. I'm sure everyone knows this drill, but then there's a fighting chance with pre-sales overseas and all that kind of stuff. But again, it comes down to these, and I don't even know what this list is, of names that will get your project financed for that kind of at that level, at like a multi-million-dollar level. But that's again a roll of the dice, and there's no guarantees with that. But and again, it's people that some producers I know who've gone and made independent films at that budget. But that seems to be the cutoff, at about $4 million.
Go ahead.
We were talking earlier about how you started to get traction with investors when you started using dailies as the first movie. I've also heard different people who would shoot a trailer first. Is that kind of what you did? Would you recommend anything like that?
We didn't do that but I think that's what there's that proof of concept.
He asked if you should do a trailer as opposed to shooting the film, if that was an option.
There's a proof of concept, which is maybe 5 minutes of your movie or 3 minutes or whatever. So I think that's the 21st century equivalent of what we did. So I think yes, you could. And we heard of a producer recently who produced a proof of concept, and they just sold the project to Netflix for a series to go to series.
Right here in the front. Question was advice on pitching.
Yeah, I think I've said this before, I think one of our greatest strengths was that the thing that we were pitching was a series of 3-minute shorts. So for the festival, we took 6 episodes, put them back to back, and said, here is our 20-minute submission. There were a lot of fully produced 22-minute pilots. There were a lot of fully produced, like, this is the thing. I think and that's not necessarily wrong, but in our case, the strength that we had was all of our pitch meetings became more of a dialogue, where people would watch the episodes and go, "Oh, you could have a podcast guy in this show," and we'd go, "Yes, correct, we would," or "Yeah, you could have," you'd have a goofy afternoon host that would come in. We're like, "Yeah, we were gonna do that," but really making it a dialogue, especially early on, even if what you're saying yes to is not a thing that you ultimately want to do. What you're saying is, yes, I'm having it's more about having a dialogue as a collaborator and saying, like, I'm open to ideas, I'm open to conversation, and I will not be a pain in your ass to work with. And I think having that, as opposed to people saying, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like, I don't know if it's for us, really worked to our advantage.
Okay, last question right here, gentlemen, in the middle. Question was about balance and distribution.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, the guys in suits did a lot of that. But I will say that during the process, speaking to an earlier point about your creative control, when it was 5 guys in a room making the web series, we could say whatever we want, we could do whatever we want, we could make whatever joke we want. And although I'm sure it was exponentially less than having a network attached, when we were up shooting it, when we were doing the full-length episodes, you know, there were conversations about how much do we swear, how could we be the most marketable to the most people without gutting the show, those were just dialogues that we had back and forth with our producers. But yeah, I mean, I would say that you know, you have to make the show you want to make, and just trust that a distributor will believe in it the same way. You know what I mean? You can't bend what you want to do to where you want to be. You can't say, I want to make a show for this network, so this is what they have or this is what they don't. Just make your thing, and then trust that the plethora of distributors, someone will fit you.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that based on the
No, I think that
boy
was
band?
spot on.
Excellent. All right, Joe, Jim, Carla, thank you guys very much for coming out. And thank you all very much for coming out as well.
All right, that was a cool round of applause, but now we need the real festival, Midwest Independent Film Festival round of applause for this amazing panel!